everybody. It is April 30th, and we wanted to have a quick chat and think around end-to-end tests for the HTTP router. I think the main goal for this meeting is to please come up with some kind of action plan on how we're going to run the tests or some follow-up items on how we do it, just because we've been discussing it for quite a while now. Let me share a little bit my screen to explain what the current situation is. Let me know if I'm missing something from the current situation to make sure that we all have the same context. So what we have right now for HTTP router is we have unit tests, which are written in the tests. We have integration tests, which we recently added, that are also written in the tests, and it's mocking the GitLab API and topology service. And as soon as we deploy the HTTP router in staging and production, we're running these, what we call smoke tests, which is quick functional tests, making sure that the GitLab instance, in this case, staging and GitLab.com are functioning as expected. And I think what we're missing, go ahead.
Those you're referring to the normal end-to-end suite that already exists that we're using in prod today, correct?
Correct, yes. So
Okay.
let's open up a deployment just so we're super clear. So let's open the latest pipeline that ran. Let's look at a deployment. So this one. So here we deployed the HTTP router, and then we have smoke test here running the QA smoke basically for staging and production. And I think what we're missing, at least specifically focusing on HTTP router, not cells in general, is some kind of quick tests for the HTTP router rules, right? So they, as you might know, the HTTP router is just a set of rules saying, hey, if there's a match for a header, let's route it to that specific place. So let's find a simple example here, session token, which is what we're working on currently. And if we look at the bottom side here, we're saying, hey, if there's a cookie called GitLab session and it has this prefix sal dash, I will route it correctly by classifying it, right? So it is just a rule engine matching. And I guess what we're missing is, okay, we've deployed the HTTP router in production or in staging. Did we mess up any of these rules? Like if you log in with a session cookie that is cell2, do you get routed to cell2 or do you not get routed at all? Another example here is private access token. If your private access token belongs to cell2, are you routed to cell2 correctly, or is it not? Like it's not really caring about the functionality that the Rails is doing. Like it doesn't care that hey, it's responded or it rendered the page properly or things like that. What it cares about that it's routed to the correct cell, because at the end of the day, that's what the HTTP router is doing, right? Just routing requests to cells. It's not doing anything else to the request itself or to the response.
So just to add up on your, Steve, that's basically what we introduced the integration test on the router, and they are covering that, but that's how we have to do it like on the bigger picture. This is only like on the router level itself, but now we should know how the communication between all these things work together.
Exactly, yeah. So the integration test mock topology, correct me if I'm wrong here, Boyan, but the integration test mock topology service and mock GitLab API. I think the end-to-end test or smoke test is more about is everything like is HTTP router able to connect to topology service, and is HTTP router able to proxy to the specific cell correctly in production right now, right? So
Correct.
yeah.
I have a question. Do we really want to have like end-to-end tests that are hitting actual APIs? Or we can have like a set of mock rules that we check and we know that those APIs are exist on production.
So, Ladi, yeah, Steve, you want to answer or?
No, you go ahead.
I think the one of the problem here is that we are mocking topology service, and like we don't know in the case that something changed on topology service that can actually affect how the router works, how everything works, because we do need that topology service part, which is actually like interconnected with the router itself. So mocking only that, it's not enough to prevent us that in case there is some like things going on that we can investigate. And also
Yeah.
if there is a change on the router or on topology service itself, that can introduce like some regressions.
And a classic example is we faced this while we were developing session token, right? We assumed the topology service will respond a specific way, or if we give it a specific body, it will respond a specific way. But topology service was actually expecting a different body being sent by HTTP router, right? So if we're mocking it, like if our words that we're mocking is wrong, doesn't match the actual reality on topology service, when we go into production, it's not going to work because topology service in production is actually
But
expecting
wait a
something.
second. I'm pretty sure I'm missing a lot here, but we are trying to, as far as I understood, here we are trying to test the contracts between HTTP router and topology service. And API itself is kind of on the side. It's not, we are, is what I understood
Yes,
correctly?
it's not just the contract between topology service and HTTP router. It's also that the HTTP router can connect to Rails application. So,
Mm-hmm.
To
and
correct cell, to correct cell.
cell,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
topology
mm-hmm.
service is responding with the correct cell, because HTTP router doesn't know anything about the cells. It's topology service that knows about the cells. So HTTP router will route it to the whatever whatever cell topology service responds. So
Mm-hmm.
um, like yes, and some more, basically, of what he said. Now, I'm not saying this is the right approach, and this is like the kind of
No,
thing that I want to discuss.
I'm just trying to like in the world of microservices, right? Just coming back many years in past. In the world of microservices, there is like this contractual test, like I forgot what's the right word for that, but there is even frameworks that you have one service and another service. One service is consumer, another service is producer, and you have a like contract between them. And you don't need to have actual API calls in order to test those contracts. This is like a one part of the equation, and another part of the equation is Rails, which I would agree which require to have an end-to-end test. But I do believe these contracts between topology and the HTTP router can be done without invoking
That's where
anything.
that's where the integration tests come in, because the integration test is mocking. So what you're mentioning, as far as I know, is contract testing, right? Where we say we have a contract. That's what the integration test is doing. So let's pick up one integration test as an example. So we go HTTP router, have integration here. We have like server, for example, and this is the topology service, and it's saying for classify, when it is session prefix, respond with cell2, right? So this is the contract that we're saying.
No, that's actually, sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
When you have a request with body contains type and a value, response should be with this proxy address.
Yes, you're right.
So this means like where the cell2 is actually located.
Yeah. So this is the contract that we're saying that The difference, the contract between HTTP router and topology service, right? HTTP router should send this request, and the response from topology service should be this. So I think the contract itself, we figure like we have it. What we need is we deployed everything in GitLab.com. Does it actually work? Like a good example of this is what we're gonna be working on Monday, right? We're deploying a new rule set. Is the rule set working in production or not, right? Like in staging in this case, right? Like I've started like manually writing them down just to make sure that we cover everything. Like, is the header for private token actually being routed to the correct user, for example, and things like that. So um, that's the part I feel like we're missing, and that's why I say end-to-end test, because it is testing with live data, I guess, in production, where it's checking that things are responding correctly. So yeah. And I know end-to-end test is a little bit overloaded, especially here at GitLab, because we have end-to-end tests that spin up environments and things like that. So when I say end-to-end tests here is purely checking that the request is routed to the correct place and it's getting the correct data because it went to the correct place, right? Like, for example, here, I'm sending the same requests with two different tokens, but one of them I expect it to be my username, the other one I expect it to be the root username because the access token is being routed to different cells, for example. And
I think we need to, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, this also checks if there's a failure. So let's say this token doesn't get routed to cell 3, but gets routed to the legacy cell, then we'll get a 401 because the private access token does not exist on legacy cell, right? So that's the kind of thing it's exercising. Like, it should expect valid data or at 200 OK, because if it wasn't routed to correct cell, it would get a 401, for example. And this is just a rudimentary like manual testing, like with curve. So I'm not saying we use curve for end-to-end test, but just to get an example.
I do believe that we need to split this the whole topic by short term and long term, because like in short term what you wrote is actually what you wrote or writing now, and what and like the full end-to-end test suite is doing is enough for the rolling out the session token. And we don't need to have full-blown end-to-end tests in order to roll out these things, right? So we're fine to start on Monday with this.
With the curl commands or with something else?
Sorry, what?
With the curl commands that I just showed, or
with curl commands and with smoke test suite that we already have.
Yeah.
Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's long, but it will give us the confidence that we are deploying the right thing. But the long-term solution, I do believe that we're gonna change the rules. Definitely, we're gonna change the rules, and I think the long-term solution should be more less manual and more faster
Yeah,
than
and that's the demo I wanted to provide. But before I go on the demo, Andy, you have a point under CI, so do you want to verbalize it?
Interesting. My buttons are out of sync with my status. There we go. Yeah, it was just I recently found this out of, we've got the full suite, we've got the smoke suite. Well, there's also a health check suite, which runs even less than what smoke does. So, if we're not actually trying to test, hey, is GitLab functioning? Can we, just pare that test down to just a bare minimum of?
I have no idea what the health checks run. So for me, a health check is like, from an infrastructure mind, a health check is a service running and configured correctly rather than Is it functioning? If that makes sense, but I don't know.
Yeah. So the main difference, I think, and that's actually a question of this. Correct my understanding. When you run the end-to-end smoke suite, you're not really caring, is GitLab functioning? You're just caring, are we able to talk to that GitLab instance?
Yeah, I think so. The reason we started running smoke tests is because we at first rule we deployed in HTTP router when we deployed HTTP router was a pass-through proxy, meaning it's just now in the network part and still sending everything to the legacy cell, right?
Mhm.
And we wanted to make sure that there's no functional regressions on doing the pass-through proxy. And now we started adding more rules. I guess the smoke tests serve their purpose now, and we either can use health checks or remove them or whatever. I think it's a matter of our risk appetite from the HTTP router perspective, right? Like, do we like is the HTTP router like technically the HTTP router is responsible for every single request that goes through GitLab.com, right? So if there is a functional regression, it might be related to the HTTP router. Like an example is, I don't know, it's truncating the body. I'm not saying it is, but let's
Sure.
say it starts truncating the body. We would only catch it if we actually run a smoke test that, hey, we're uploading a package and that package should be available to us, but it's not. Now that failure could be, oh, Rails is messing something up or the HTTP router is messing up. So that's what I mean, depending on our risk appetite, if we want to turn them off or not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been campaigning for in this whole lot in dedicated as well as in cells of, we've got this huge end-to-end test suite. Let's make sure we're running tests that actually verify what we want to verify, not just running a bunch of tests. And
Yeah.
like one thing I'm starting a conversation about is, okay, I can't tell you what's in the smoke suite right now just because every team in GitLab can change what's in the smoke suite.
Yeah.
So I want us to be more conscious of, hey, we have a concern that will the packet get corrupted? Let's make sure we're running a test that does that.
Yeah.
And only the test that runs that, trusting that the entire suite has been running against the GitLab environment product at some point prior to deploying to a live environment.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I do think that health check is not enough probably because we are testing like the rules and it's only partial functionality, right? So like it has a bunch of regexps, and if some API call doesn't met the regexp, then it's not going to be like GitLab won't be down. It will be just responding, not correctly responding.
Yeah, it basically, the smoke suite currently has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Let's say, well, there's 80 results. So 80 tests get run as part of the smoke suite. And you'll have to sort of set aside your expectation of what health check the term means. But they've defined, in fact, I can share my screen instead of just staring at it and just not seeing what I'm doing. Is that the right one? No. That one. They've added a label just like smoke that they've called health_check that has 8 tests in it as opposed to the smoke suite, which has 80 tests. So if we don't really care what we're testing, just that we're reaching out to the Rails application and we're getting a valid response back, running 5 tests versus 80 tests would run a lot faster.
Yeah, that's fair.
And we
For
can
this
dive into
specific
what
one,
those
yeah.
tests actually are. I can take 15 minutes and dig through what the tests that are actually run are, and we can say yes, they do something we care about or not.
Okay.
And
Okay, so moving to the POC, so that smoke test is more testing the race, like looking if we can connect to the race. Going back to are our rules actually working or not? I wanted to do a little demo, and like this is not done by any chance or any stretch of the imagination, but this is the HTTP router repository. We have a new directory end-to-end tests, and this is where we're doing things, right? So session routing, again, really simple. It's going into the user sign-in page, um, doing a username and password login, and making sure that the login page is successful and I'm seeing a specific piece of text. And then for cell 2, this is where we're testing the session prefix rule is where we're saying, hey, GitLab session has this prefix, and then I should be able to log into my cell2 username. So let's run it quickly. This is running on my JDK and it's failing because I didn't pass it. Correct tickets. Sorry. So this ran and it actually logged in. So for example, let's say session routing is not working, right? And I write cell22, right? And cell22 does not exist. If I run these tests, we should expect it to fail because this username and these passwords are only valid for cell2, right? So this will time out. Well, hopefully it will time out. Well, okay, that's the first part to time out. But basically, it's the same for private access tokens. So I'm basically translating these commands that I wrote here inside of like JavaScript test inside of the HTTP router repository, where it's saying, hey, I'm gonna send an API request to V4 user with this token, and I expect it to get 200 token rather than a 401 because the private access token only exists in cell 2, not in cell 1, right? So this one, see, it exceeded the 30-second. Um, the 30-second timeout, sorry. So these are like basically translating the correct commands into here, and we can execute, for example, this command as soon as we deploy it. So with HTTP router, since we are using Cloudflare workers, we first deploy the version and it's receiving 0% of the traffic. And then we have the ability to send some requests to that new version, to run, like to check some things, and then start increasing the traffic on the new version to 5%, 10%, and so on and so forth, right? So we also have the ability to run these quick tests, hopefully. If they're successful, they would be within a few seconds to run it when it's at 0%, check that the routing rules are working as expected, and then start increasing it to 5% and so on and so forth. So this is the idea I was playing with. I know there's multiple ways to achieve this, and like another example of achieving the way to achieve this is what Bayan said with Omar's POC, which is point number 5, running it on the JDK. So uh, this end-to-end test I wrote, like the biggest con I see is it's hard to run in CI pipeline because you'd have to set up a whole environment in CI, right? And I guess that's where the JDK E2E tests POC from Omar struggled a little bit because we had to set up 2 new GitLab instances, configure topology servers and all that, where I'm saying maybe skip that and just configure the test data like we do on staging. Like we set up a QA user and just go with that. The drawback of that is you can only run it in JDK locally or in staging. So when you open up a merge request, we don't really provide feedback on end-to-end level for the engineer working on that merge request. That's something that maybe we can improve on later on when we have CI set up 2 cells and configure them and enter them with JDK. But as a small iteration, I would say maybe we just, that's my proposal anyways. I'm not sure. Probably it's very naive, but I'm curious, like, I don't know of any other better solution. At least I can't think of any better solution that will give us a quick feedback loop around this.
Yeah, that's one I've been sort of playing around with in the back of my mind because I haven't found somebody to really hash it out with from the test perspective on is, I'd love first us to have more representation of cells in the MR and in the earlier test pipelines. That way, my overarching goal is once we get to the point of, okay, we're actually deploying this to production, we only really want to test to make sure that it's working here, that this deploy worked, not are all these moving pieces working together correctly. And how to shove that back, it sounds like everybody's facing the same problem. Because we're moving from a monolith to this distributed architecture.
Yeah, and the other part is I would hate for backend engineers or engineers in general. They have to open up a merge request in HTTP router to add a new routing route, and then say, "Oh, I have to go open up an end-to-end test inside of the GitLab or GitLab project for a merge request that's completely like in 2 separate projects." So
yeah,
it would be really nice to have all the end-to-end tests where it cares about, which is the HTTP router. So if I create a new routing route, what I have to do is create a unit test for whatever I have to do, integration test, and then an end-to-end test that runs in production.
And
yeah.
that's one thing that they are starting the discussion on in amongst SATs is, we have this big monolith of end-to-end tests, breaking it apart into subsets. We've gotten the directive, hey, we need to split this apart. No one's gotten to the point of, okay, how are we going to do this? All those details are still future to be determined, but this is a prime example of, we've got a small piece. We should be able to end-to-end test it in isolation and have some confidence before we start tacking on all the other pieces. We're component testing it in effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, like, what are your folks' initial gut reaction? Is the quick demo that I showed a direction that we can go, and like, is it a good enough first direction that we can build on, then adding it to CI later on, or should we rethink it and focus, like, have the end-to-end test, like, for example, Omar is doing? Like, what are your opinions?
Well, certainly.
I have a question too. Oh, sorry, Andy.
So
we are already having multiple cells running on the stage in production, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your approach seems like pretty lightweight from my perspective. So like probably like the way how we tweak, we can run it against like the cells on staging. We know already the topology service is up and running. So maybe that would be like the first like insight. I would definitely have to dig into that and do like a bit more research. But I believe, and what I like the most, as you said, is like having everything centralized. We are having these E2E tests, a part of HTTP router. Where do we care to be part of it? and it doesn't need to bring like a ping pong between engineers going between multiple projects and then like taking care how everything will be executed.
Right.
So the only part that like we have to generalize is like how they're going to be executed on when exactly. Would it be trigger only when we change a rule or we change any things inside the router, etc. But like I think we are quite on a good like path, at least to start with the release of a session token.
Okay.
My own, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think one question that I've had that's been in the back of my mind, and it's partially just that I haven't touched HTTP router all that much. HTTP router lives in Cloudflare. How is the mocking of, so when the developer's working on it, are they necessarily needing Cloudflare or can they work locally?
They can work locally, so they have Cloudflare provide Wrangler D. It's called Wrangler D, which is like a local Cloudflare instance of Worker, which mimics the production environment.
And is there, you got your local Worker D running. Is there a concern in your mind of, okay, I just ran a whole bunch of end-to-end tests against Worker D. I'm now moving up into Cloudflare proper. Is there a concern that there's a disconnect there besides moving hardware?
I don't think so. At least that's not HTTP router's concern, in the sense we have been blissfully saying that locally matches production, and just because that's Cloudflare's responsibility and Wrangler's responsibility of matching dev and prod, and not HTTP router responsibility or JDK's responsibility, where right in JDK it is our responsibility to have JDK matching production, but for us we're a consumer of a service, so
Sure.
we're not testing like if Wrangler D Worker D works the same as in from local machine to prod. So that part where it's a black box for us, and we assume it works.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, I'm just being a tester. I'm seeing edges and making sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you want to go ahead, Vlad.
Yeah, my only concern is that when we run those tests, we already rolled out the new version of the rule set on staging.
So that's what I mean by running. So you're familiar that we're doing progressive gradual rollouts, right, with HTTP router. So so with gradual deployments, the way it works is we first upload the version and then we give it the percentage for that version, right? So we can do version overrides. So if we send a Cloudflare Worker version override header and send in the SHA, so for example, in here, in this specific example, let's say here I'll add a new header called Cloudflare Worker, let's do this. It will use that
the new version.
The new version, and it's not receiving any traffic, right? Like no user is actually facing that. So like it's a new version deployed receiving 0% traffic. So what I've been thinking as well on how to trigger these is if we look at the deployer, HTTP router deployer. And at the end of the day, it's just a glorified bash script, right? We have validates deployment right now here, right? So this one is just checking the version ID is returned as expected. But here we can technically also run the end-to-end tests by just running it, because we do have the code, the end-to-end test cloned already here, because this is how we're deploying the HTTP router.
And this is answering my questions. My question, I didn't know that this functionality, like gradual deployment with the header exists.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, well, we can run it, but we already deployed the things.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. Like if you're doing like 5%, it's very hard to hit those 5%, especially on
Yeah,
stage.
exactly. So this highly depends on the version, the versioning thing. So yeah.
Then we probably can we actually deploy the new version and set zero traffic to that?
Yes. First, it's always like this. So if we look at the deploy script, we are doing upload. So npx string version uploads. First, we're uploading the thing, and if we look at the function calls here, we are uploading versions, setting versions, and then deploy with strategy, meaning we're gradually increasing um, the percentage from 5 to 100. So we can do upload version, run end-to-end tests, for example, and pass in the version ID, and then increase it to 5% and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's how I'm thinking of
That's
doing
pretty
this.
cool, actually. I like the idea, but my question is, do we have enough time since we have like only one day left on Friday to
Yeah,
populate
I
those
think for
tests?
staging, it's fine to do manual testing, and like we get a better understanding of what.
I wouldn't test new solution on production.
But we'll be running this on deployments all the time, right? So when we deploy the staging, we'll be running these end-to-end tests, and like we can also kind of feature flag it to only run these end-to-end tests in staging to start off with.
But basically, we need to implement only a handful of those tests, right? Like one test per
Routing
or
rule.
a couple tests per routing rule, or one, maybe even one test is enough.
Yeah.
We can spend Friday on writing that. We can just split it. I will take like half of them. You will take another half, and we can just
Yeah.
we can
I'm
try to
off
squeeze
Friday,
this.
but
And
I'm working
ah,
tomorrow. So, but I
you
can
off
start
Friday.
tomorrow. Yeah, I can start tomorrow.
Then you can hand over what's the left for me on Friday, and I will write down the rest of the tests, and we can test this on Monday on staging because I don't really want to change anything like
Yeah,
on
that's fine.
production without.
Yeah, the test, we have a few things that will be tricky. One of them, we should only run certain tests if the specific routing rule is configured, because we don't want to run, like, for example, private access token in production starting Monday, because that will always fail, right? Because that is not configured. So we have to book like, oh, we only run this test when this rule is enabled and things like that. But those are implementation details. If we agree this is the right choice, so yeah.
Oh, it's definitely better than Curl.
No.
It does the same, but it looks better.
Yeah, it is programmed and reproducible easier. So yeah, and this introduces a new tool to the stack called Playwright, which is basically running Chromium as a browser in headless mode for like the web request, which right now it's just a session, so it's not like it's super heavy. It runs within 5 seconds, and but like for API requests, we do this. The only part that I haven't fully figured out how to test is job tokens, because job tokens are ephemeral and job tokens are only valid for the duration of the job. So that might be something that we might not be able to test properly, just because we can't generate a job token unless we go full blown end-to-end test where we have a runner, register the runner, start a new job, pick up that job, use that job token, and make sure it gets routed. Like I think here it's like trade-offs, unfortunately. And I'd much rather get 80% of the way than no percent of 0%.
Another thing is that I would still execute full-blown QA tests after we roll out to 100%.
Okay.
Because since we are testing bunch of regexps, there is a chance that one particular API call doesn't match the regexp or something like that. Yeah, and probably at the very end of the rollout, we can just execute this QA test. And because like we are using QA tests on rolling out new versions on GitLab.com, and we are kind of confident enough that it's good enough to roll out the new version. I would just to be on the safe side, I would just execute this
Yeah,
QA test at the
I'm
end.
happy to continue running the smoke test. I'm not too opposed to it right now. So yeah.
One question,
And
Steve. Can we generate job tokens via API or GraphQL?
Not that I'm aware of, it's the Rails backend that generates a job token, makes it like when a job gets created.
Yeah.
So unless we have an API that will generate a job or triggers a job, and then we try and get out the job token from there, that's one way we can do it, but I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah,
I haven't fully
sounds
investigated
messy.
it. Yeah, it sounds messy, but like,
Yeah.
Like the runner registration token, we can easily continue checking because that's just a simple API call, and make sure that the runner is registered and deregistered to clean up after ourselves. But job tokens, I'm not sure, just because it's the Rails application who generates those tokens just in time and invalidates them when the job is finished. So it's really hard to sort that out, I think.
And it sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome.
Cool. Steve,
Okay.
can you just provide maybe like a link to your demo or like merge request if you consider
Yeah,
that
I
push?
haven't pushed anything. I'll do it tomorrow because I'm working tomorrow and I'll be off Friday. So I'll work on push our work in progress and merge request tomorrow, and then we can reconvene around that. Does that make sense? Are we
Sounds
all
great to
happy
me.
with this testing structure? I'm looking more validation from Andy as well, just to make sure that we're not going against the grain here, because it does feel like we're going a bit against the grain because we're not using the end-to-end test from Ruby, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think it's actually you're leading the grain of where some of this is wanting to go.
Sweet.
We're wanting to break apart that monolith.
Okay.
The one piece that I've been, and it's semi-related to this and semi-not, is that I've been trying to figure out is, how can we push any of this earlier in the cycle?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Because we do a lot of, when we get to staging, that's where we've got everything together and we can actually test all these pieces. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like trying to do it at the MR level is too early. There's too many moving pieces. We don't necessarily have everything stood up. How early can we shove this so we're actually running something live?
Yeah, I think it's more of a time investment rather than we can't do it. It's more we need to invest a lot of time to do it. In the
Yeah.
sense, we already have the possibility of spinning up JDKs inside of CI pipeline, right? Like the JDK team already does it, and the
Mhm.
Rails team already does it there. So I think it's a matter of reusing that pattern inside of the HTTP router repository.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of time investments rather than it's not technically possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a logistics. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
also a double-edged sort of, okay, we want to do it earlier, but we don't want to make the MR pipeline suddenly take an hour to run.
Exactly.
So it's doing that balancing act. And There's lots of other
Yeah.
people that are balancing that act as well, so it's a multifaceted thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, sounds like it's a reasonable and right approach.
Sweet. Okay, then I'll get started tomorrow on this. I'll mostly focus on writing the basic tests and writing the documentation on what we discussed today, and then we'll continue from there.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Thank you so
Cool.
much.
Thank
I
you.
know it's
Thank
really late
you.
for
Thank
some
you, Steve.
folks, and
Thanks.
we went over.
Have a good
Have a
day.
nice day. Bye-bye.
But